Not to sound cold-hearted or anything, but who was someone who died and had it coming to them? There was a blind man in my town who was cruel to his guide dog. People had seen him hitting the dog in public before. One day, he got hit by a car and died. I'm not saying the dog led him into traffic, but I'm not saying it. I'll tell this story for my late best friend. His father had mentally abused him for a long time in his teens. Basically all through high school and before. It was so bad that at one point his father called into the school and said my friend was going to shoot up the place, which he would never do. My friend had been grounded for a whole year once, if not multiple times. A couple years ago, they found his father dead in his chair, alone and bloated. To this day, I had never seen my friend more happy than when he found out his father had died alone. Deputy number 1, huh? Will you look at that? Old man asshole fell from the second story down the stairs. Broke both arms and legs, looks like. Messed his face up real bad too. What a tragedy. Deputy number 2, new in the job, but Dave, this is a one-story house. Deputy Dave, yep, sure is a shame. If he had one of those baby gates at the top of the stairs, he might not have fallen. Probably drunk again. Deputy number 2, Dave, there's not a second story. And he's laying on the back porch. What are you talking about? Deputy Dave, well Steve, it's like this. Either the old man fell down a flight of stairs from the second floor and died, or that lovely, sweet old woman in the living room killed him. That sweet old woman is 63. And that's a big if she killed him, and got convicted, she would die in prison. On the other hand, if that old asshole that everybody knew was an abusive drunk fell down and got killed, well then that sweet old lady can collect on the life insurance and draw his pension and go live with her daughter in Florida. Now tell me Steve, which of those sounds like the happy ending to this story? Deputy Steve, well damn, Dave, I didn't even notice those stairs over there. Boy, I must have been distracted looking at all the blood. Who do I call? The medical examiner. Deputy Dave, nope, call Charlie at the funeral home. Tell him we've got a special case for him. He'll know what you mean. My cousin got drunk and violent when his wife tried to leave him. He shot her but missed. Her father was with her and he shot my cousin dead. No one in my family said anything as tribute to him online. Not many family members came to his funeral. I think most of us were angry at him. It was surreal. Victoriano Alvarez. There is an island off the coast of Mexico called Clipperton Island. In 1914, the island had a population of 100 with resupply ships coming every 2 months. When the Mexican Revolution and World War I broke out, the ships stopped coming. By 1917 there were only 15 women and children and one man, Victoriano Alvarez, left alive. Many died from scurvy, while others drowned attempting to chase a passing ship for help. Being the only man left on the island, Victoriano Alvarez declared himself the king and seized all the remaining weapons on the island. He then began his tyrannical rule and would rape and murder the remaining survivors. Eventually he was killed by Terza, who was one of his favorite victims. Shortly after this, an American ship passed by and rescued the remaining 4 women and 7 children who survived and told their story. When asked about Alvarez, the survivors claimed he had died from scurvy like the others. 2 sailors took interest to their story and investigated the island. They witnessed the horrors, making the connections to their story as they went. When they came across Alvarez's body, laying in a pool of his own blood, they exchanged no words, gave each other a nod and moved on. Source. My maternal uncle who sexually abused me for years and my parents just let him get help instead of prison. He got on a modified boat that was going way fast, hit a wave and the boat disintegrated. He hit his head and either died on impact or drowned while unconscious. Either way, he got off way easier than he deserved. I found out an uncle-in-law had been molesting his kids for years. He would rape his mentally handicapped, I don't know if this is the right words anymore, son, and one time impregnated his daughter. She had a miscarriage, but was always off and really touchy at family events. It all made sense after learning this. He was a Marine, so played up the hero nonsense even though he never deployed. No one seemed to question him, and they had a what happens in the home stays there mentality. One day, he was road raging and picked a fight with the guy in a red vehicle, all we know. Witnesses said the two were driving after each other down a country road. Road vehicle guy apparently ran him off the road, then emptied 6.44 Magnum rounds into Uncle to finish him off. No one came forward. So red vehicle guy, if you have been living with this guilt all your life about what happened, let it go. Everything went down in the early 90s. My piece of shit stepdad kept groping and fingering me when I was 9 years old. That went on for a few years whenever I was left alone with him. When I was 12 he tried to get me to have sex. I was terrified and said no. I guess he wanted me to say okay, and when I didn't, he started panicking and locked me in the basement a few times. I was terrified and wanted to speak up but didn't, for all the reasons kids don't speak up when they should. It was 1981. My stepdad left on a business trip and I prayed to God that he would please just make him die. A few days later, my stepdad had a heart attack and died. That was one of the best days of my life. Ken Rex McElroy, June 1, 1934 – July 10, 1981, was a resident of Skidmore, Missouri, United States. Known as the town bully, McElroy's unsolved killing became the focus of international attention. Over the course of his life, McElroy was accused of dozens of felonies, including assault, child molestation, statutory rape, arson, animal cruelty, hog and cattle rustling, and burglary. 2. In all, he was indicted 21 times but escaped conviction each time, except for the last 2. 3. In 1981, McElroy was convicted of shooting and seriously injuring the town's 70-year-old grocer, Ernest Bowenkamp. 1. McElroy successfully appealed the conviction and was released on bond, after which he engaged in an ongoing harassment campaign against Bowenkamp and others who were sympathetic to Bowenkamp, including the town's Church of Christ minister. He appeared in a local bar, the D&G Tavern, armed with an M1 Garand rifle and bayonet, and later threatened to kill Bowenkamp. 3. The next day, McElroy was shot to death in broad daylight as he sat with his wife Trina in his pickup truck on Skidmore's Main Street. 2. He was struck by bullets from at least 2 different firearms, in front of a crowd of people estimated as between 30 and 46. 1. To date, no one has been charged in connection with McElroy's death. 1. In India, over a decade ago, some scum was going around raping women in one area. As we can expect, nothing was done. The rapist was some kind of gangster and many of his victims were Dalits untouchables. Police told the women who dared to report it that they were whores and adulterers. One day, a very cunning woman threatened to blow them up when he and his gang attacked her house. The gang was run out of town and an angry mob burned the rapist's house down. The rapist handed himself over to police for protection. Over 200 women arrived at the courthouse. When the rapist joked about one of the victims being a prostitute, the police laughed. That was it. The mob of women attacked him, led by the victim he laughed at. They threw powder in his face and stabbed him at least 70 times. His penis was cut off. When police tried to arrest a few of the women, every woman in the area claimed responsibility. They still arrested a few women, but they were let off. Link to the story, https://allthatsentarresting.com/Aku-Yadov. My stepfather used to tell me a story about a buddy of his that would always swerve to hit animals when he was driving. Sadistic fuck that just wanted to kill the squirrels and raccoons running across the street. So one day, this dude swerved to hit a dog. One of the dog's ribs punctured his tire, he lost control of the truck, and he wrapped it around a tree. Local asshole of my small hometown. Dude always swerved to hit animals. I don't think he ever succeeded in killing anyone's pets, but he fucking tried. Well, someone was outside with their dog. The owner goes inside to grab a drink. The dog is well behaved and it's sitting in the yard next to the road. Asshole comes flying down the road in his loud-ass lifted truck. The owner hears him, grabs his shotgun next to the front door, and heads outside right as the asshole misses his dog and spins out across the yard. As he tries to run over the dog a second time, the owner blasts away, hitting the guy in the face the first shot. He keeps firing, hitting the front, side, and rear of the truck. The truck keeps going and runs into the ditch on the other side of the road. Asshole survived the shot, missing a significant portion of his face, lived for 6 hours in critical condition, and died in surgery. Fucking scumbag deserved it? Judge ruled in favor of the owner with no penalties or fines or anything. Fun fact, the brother was caught by police taking a shit on his asshole brother's grave. They released him LOL. His family was actually decent people, but he was such utter scum, he deserved it. Richard Huckle, also known as Britain's worst pedophile, which is saying a lot when you think about it, posed as a photographer for charities and religious organizations in Asia in order to get close to children and eventually groom and rape them. He was also involved in the sex trafficking business where he helped sell many of the children into sex slavery, where he's also filmed and distributed CP. A true monster. Turns out, dude was capital B brutally tortured and murdered in prison in the absolute worst way possible in 2019. The details are way too graphic to write down here, but man, he got was what was coming and then some. Edit, wouldn't be Reddit if someone didn't give a story about child rape a wholesome award. 8 weeks ago in Ireland, a group of 3 well-known criminals were speeding down a motorway against the flow of traffic. They eventually crashed, setting the car on fire and dying in flames. They had targeted the elderly, breaking into their homes and stealing their life savings. Since the deaths of the 3 prolific criminals, there has been a significant decrease in burglaries in the area. https://m.int.ie/irish-news/crimes/number-of-f-burglaries-after-deaths-of-f-3-criminals-in-7-crash-4085941.html. My husband abused me physically, sexually, emotionally, mentally, and financially for 18 years before I finally had the courage to leave. Was a severe heroin addict. Literally could not overestimate what a non-existent father he was. He made the separation hell. Just every trashy, deadbeat dead thing you've ever heard of, he did. Became a severe alcoholic, tried to get me fired. He was unemployed for 2 years at this point, threatened suicide repeatedly, multiple arrests, car crashes, more physical abuse, drug dealer girlfriends, got severely in debt, etc. etc. Then he filed a bullshit protective order against me asking that the kids be removed by police force from the only parent they've ever had to live on the floor of his 3 drug dealer siblings' apartment. He died 3 days after filing that, drove himself into a roundabout with a 2.5 blood alcohol level. Honest to God, when I woke up at 5 a.m. and saw all the missed calls, all I could think was, please just let this finally be the end. Been grateful every day since that. It was the only good parenting move he ever made, was removing himself from their lives by death. This is how I feel about my dad. He was all of the things you mentioned about your husband, except he didn't do heroin, and he went out of his way to make life a living hell for my mom after she left him. The only memories I have of him are violent ones. He fell asleep in a parking garage with his car running and died of carbon monoxide poisoning when I was like 4. My mom was so relieved and all the bad stuff just ended instantly. I've had people tell me my whole life they were sorry for my loss when they find out he died, but I never felt that way. I feel like if he hadn't died, things would have probably been a lot worse for us, and I wouldn't have put it past him to be the kind of person to have killed us all and then himself one day. Back in the 90s, I read a newspaper article about a man who called his girlfriend at work and told her he was going to kill her dog. He took the dog outside and started to beat it with the butt of his gun. The gun went off, and he was shot in the head and died. The dog suffered a few injuries from the beating, but got better and lived. I laughed hysterically at that one. My boss was appalled at my glee at this man's death, but seriously, fuck that guy. My grandmother. My father got my mother pregnant really young and married her, and ended up having 4 kids together by the time she was 21 and ended up separating by the time I was born. Basically, my dad took her away and kept pumping babies out and made her stay home, so my mother didn't have a HS diploma and couldn't get to job and basically had no support whatsoever besides my dad. This got my grandmother really mad, and she always stated my mother ruined my father's life. My father was a piece of shit and raped women and was a party guy who never even took care of us, while talking very bad about my mother. There was 4 of us. My older brother and sister were the favorites cause me and my other sister looked exactly like my mom, so my grandmother hated us. I distinctly remember my grandmother telling me when I was 8 years old to get away from her cause I was disgusting and no one wanted me. She'd often call me a little ugly boy, and even called me a trash disposal. I never understood it. She would take my older siblings to bingo night, take them out to the mall, buy them clothes and snacks, while my other sister and I were so mistreated by her. She even told me once my mom had AIDS and to not touch her cause I'd get AIDS too. Another comment I distinctly remember is my grandmother telling me to always have more than one boyfriend cause then I can use them each for something different. I would tell my father how mean Grandma Blanca was and to please not make me go over to her house, but he never cared. Never cared. She ended up dying in 2005. She was about to get in the shower and had a heart attack on the toilet while taking a shit. While everyone was devastated, I didn't even feel an ounce of sadness or remorse. This lady who had been mean to me my whole life had a heart attack while shitting, so it felt like karma to me, lol. To this day my dad hates how I never even told him I was sorry his mom died, and I've tried explaining to him how much damage she did to me mentally, but my father isn't any better than her, so I've also cut him out of my life. I felt bad for my half-sister cause my dad named her Blanca after his mom, and his sister went apeshit saying some brat from the Philippines has no right to have their mom's name. And the only thing I still think of is how it's a shame how no one else saw my grandmother for who she really was. I had a bully in high school 2 years ahead of me. We were on the lacrosse team together. He used to beat me with lacrosse sticks, shove me in lockers, whip lacrosse balls at my head without a helmet on, verbally abuse me daily, you know, bully stuff. I told my parents about it, who told his parents about it, who promptly said I needed to man up and just take it because boys will be boys. Anyway, he and his entire family died when their private jet crashed into the side of a mountain. Good riddance to all of them. There's a man in our town who died of COVID earlier in the year. He's been under suspicion for literally decades for various fraud and business sketchiness, not to mention abusing his stepdaughters. Oh, and he was a suspect of a girl who went missing back in the 90s and they've yet to solve her case. He literally got caught during a sting that was trying to catch people who were soliciting minors on the internet. Still never had a single charge stick on anything. When he died, the entire town basically was like, finally. Also, when my grandmother dies, I'll show up long enough to make sure she's really in the box and kick some dirt on it. At least if her evilness doesn't make her outlive us all. My great-grandfather had a story about this really bad guy from their small hometown. He would kick dogs, shoot at cats and hit children that got in his way. Wouldn't fight anyone bigger than him, but if he thought he could take you down he would. Didn't drink or smoke either, really weird for the time, so it's not like he was an angry drunk, he was just evil. So my great-grandpa's sister is about 17 at the time and this evil fucker decides he's in love with her. He was late 20s. She is horrified and terrified by him and is torn between just leaving town and getting married to anyone else in the hopes he would leave her alone. He's sending her letters and following her around town whenever she leaves the house alone. She literally doesn't get out of the house unless her brother or father are with her because they were both bigger than him and he wouldn't fight them. Well, she and a young man from church start courting, and since he has a reputation as a good hard-working fellow, her father gives them his blessing to get married. The engagement is announced and the harassment stops. One night her brother is staying over in the next town and her father has to rush her mother to see the doctor after an accident. Fell down some stairs. She turned out fine but needed stitches. Sister has to stay home and watch over the younger kids. Well, the bad guy must have been watching the house because he breaks in and rapes her. He comes back the next day and tells her dad that he took her virginity and if he didn't have her marry him, he was going to tell the whole town, and being a small, Bible Belt town in the 1900s, it would ruin her reputation. As soon as he finished talking, her father beat the crap out of him right there on the porch. He managed to run off after brother pulled father off of him. The bad guy was never seen again and the police never bothered looking for him. No one outside of the immediate family knows what happened. She married that sweet church man and they had a decent life together. She was a pretty nervous person after that, but her husband loved her all the same, not sure if he was told. My great-grandpa said that she lived in peace because he told her that the bad guy wouldn't be coming around anymore, and one time he told me I won't say what exactly happened to that bastard, but I can tell you he's long gone and it wasn't my daddy who did it. As far as the rest of the town was concerned, he just took off and everyone was so thrilled no one went looking for him, not even the man's own mother. I'm not thrilled about vigilante justice, but I'm also not thrilled about thinking about how the story could have gone if he hadn't disappeared. My grandfather. He tried to sexually abuse me when I was 13. He attacked me and thankfully I was strong enough to fight him off successfully. He was a racist, a misogynist, and would beat me until I was bruised as a child. He got cancer and suffered greatly. Started to go into remission and then had a nasty fall in the shower that landed him in a rehab facility. He got COVID from the rehab facility and died. I never saw him or spoke to him during all these events, but it gave me peace to know that he was finally gone. Someone I know claims the government, and hospitals doctors who are into it paid threatened, is faking the numbers. Some people do die, but it's not that many and mainly old weak people, and you can die from the flu too if you're like that, so what's the difference? Hospitals kill people who would otherwise be fine without hospitalization by giving them too much oxygen or not giving them antibiotics that apparently work fine. I can't wait for people to start claiming climate change is a hoax and leading us to our doom. Oh, wait, right. My grandmother. She was my mother's mother. She cheated on her loving husband and he ended up committing suicide. She hated my father from the start. Tried to get him arrested a few times for things he didn't do, like possession of illegal firearms or beating me and my half-siblings. He ended up going to court a few times for some of these accusations, was proven innocent. Come to find out my grandmother had also talked my mother, also a shitty person, to claim welfare even though she wasn't entitled to it back then. My father had no knowledge of this since both of my parents had separate bank accounts. But since my parents were still married, the judge made my father pay around $30,000 back to the state of NY since my mom couldn't hold a damn job for more than a few weeks and they were still married. And here's where karma hit. My grandmother ended up getting colon cancer and died. I also just found out that my mother has been homeless for a few years and none of her 4 children, including me, want to help her because the second she gets involved, it gets ruined. When I was growing up there was a kid who bullied the shit out of me. Threw food at me, called me names, did all kinds of stuff, a standard bully in that era, late 80s, early 90s. From about 5th or 6th grade on. His mom was a huge asshole as well, might be where he got it from. Freshman or sophomore year his mommy dies and he mellows out. His mom was awful to everyone she came across that either didn't agree with her, side with her, or didn't do things the way she wanted. They made my family's life hell. Now that the husband is free from here for however many years, he is apparently a really nice guy. There used to be a guy on my estate growing up who was a nasty piece of work. He used to swagger around acting like he owned the place and would beat people up regularly just for looking in his direction. He used to intimidate the local girls into performing sex acts on him, trap them in the hallway, tower over them, insist on them giving him BJ's etc. Some were strong enough to keep saying no and insist he go away, but other times the weaker girls would give in and do it. I was barely a teenager at the time and he was on the fringes of our social circle, meaning we didn't see him often, but when we did he used to suck the atmosphere out of the room instantly with his constant, unrelenting levels of aggression. No one wanted to be the one to piss him off, as he was more than happy to pull a knife and put it to people's throats. He always bragged about the people he cut up and did 6 months inside for stabbing one unlucky victim pretty badly. So it was rather fitting when his own brother ended up stabbing him to death after an argument over drugs. He was more than happy to stab others without even thinking, so when it happened to him I truly felt like karma was real and it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I honestly feel like the estate was a better place after his death and have never even felt remotely bad about it. I recently found out a guy I used to work with died of cancer. He must have been in his 50s. Anyway, he was always a bit full on. Then one day at a work party 12 years ago he kept trying to grab me and dance with me, grabbing my ass etc. I was sober as I was driving and tried to move away. I was 20 at the time and was tall, slim and attractive, so used to men trying to grind at clubs, and I generally just tried to lose myself in groups with friends. This guy wasn't having any of it and weaseled his way between us and full groped me down there. I wriggled away to freedom and went home straight away. The next day at work I tried to raise it and I was told, "Oh, that's just him, ignore it." When I read he had died I just felt relief. Every time I hear someone say they trust in God, they always expect some sort of biblical deus ex machina or other form of divine intervention where he will perform some sort of miracle, or cause a natural disaster that will nearly kill you and cause you to rethink your plan, or smite the heathens with bolts from the blue. None of them ever consider him just sending dozens of people on your path with the advice to not do the incredibly dumb thing you want to do. or hundreds of scientists working together to create a vaccine or other medicine with unprecedentedly high potency, or sending rescue workers to evacuate you. The guy who molested me, M, from ages 3-7. He got into a car accident on the night before Thanksgiving 1 year, no seatbelt. Died shortly after impact. Next up, while he hasn't died yet, and I very much look forward to the day, my Phil. Molested, raped, and beat my wife and her siblings when they were very young, from when their memory started till they were about 7 and their mom took them all and left. Not only did he do that, but he's contributed absolutely nothing to society. He's refused to get a job since the mid-90s and has just mooched off other people in the government since then. And for the last 15 years he's been on dialysis and in a home. All paid for by tax dollars. Draining Medicaid Medicare of hundreds of thousands of dollars, taking resources away from people who deserve him. He's gotten mostly what he deserves. He's withered away and he's an incontinent fuck stuck in a wheelchair. We all call him a cockroach, because somehow with all his medical issues over the years, he's still alive. I pray that he gets COVID, or some sort of excruciatingly painful form of cancer. Ideally I'd love to beat him mercilessly and choke the life out of him for what he did to my wife and her siblings, but I enjoy my freedom in my life too much. So I just get to wait for the day we get the call he's finally died, so we can cremate him and we can throw his ashes in the toilet, literally shit on them, and flush that piece of shit away. This happened about a month ago, so it is very recent. The father of my sister's child drowned in a lake while high on pills. He was an absolute monster. The most aggravating part were the people sending my family and I their condolences and not knowing half of what he did to my sister and to my family. His track record made it very hard to have sympathy for him. He constantly talked about how he was untouchable and how he did not want to be clean because nothing would happen to him. On top of that, he hit my sister, and I really do believe he got her pregnant on purpose because he constantly referred to her as his meal ticket. Even his own family had given up hope. I know how it makes me sound, but I am glad he is dead. I am glad he is dead because it was not long before he took someone else out that did not have it coming. He drove high and drunk constantly and without a valid license. I could write an essay on all the shit he did, but I think it's safe to say that he more than had it coming. My grandfather, who recently died of cancer. He never wanted kids in the first place, yet still had 4 of them, including my dad, and did nothing but abuse them and his wife for decades. Guy kicked his daughter out of his house when she was 13, regularly hit his family over meaningless shit, forced my dad at 16 or so to use his own paycheck to pay their bills while he sat on the couch and drank beer all day. Also, he refused to give my aunt, who was like 8 months pregnant, a ride somewhere, so she had to walk there in the rain, and didn't go to my parents' wedding because he had to work. He didn't. And to top it off, me and my dad were expected to go visit him when he was dying, even though he hadn't bothered to call or visit us in like 15 years. Osama Bin Laden. I'm shocked I haven't seen him listed here. Not only did he lead a terror organization and plan the attack on the Twin Towers, but this man told countless young men to sacrifice their life in the name of God and promised them eternal life and other riches in the afterlife for the murder and terrorization of not only Americans but people in their own country, their own kinsmen, and other innocent peoples. He literally convinced or forced children and young adults to be suicide bombers countless times for his own selfish goals, some of which sadly were for absolute nothing. Jim Jones from Jonestown. He deserves much worse than death. I'm glad he's not on this earth any longer, but what he did to those people is horrifying. He forced his cult followers as Gianna to drink poison juice laced with cyanide, spelling, and he killed all the children first so the adults that were left with no hope and would also comply. He also shot the children up with the poison with the help of sycophant nurses. All this happened after the Prime Minister of the United States came to check on the followers to see if they were safe. Jim Jones knew they would come for him, so he took down all his followers with him. 909 people died that day. The photos are horrifying. The tape recording of his last sermon as people get in line for the poison and are slowly dying is his nightmare. I bawled my eyes out listening to it as the children screamed in agony. I had to hear it though. He was a psychopath and I truly wish him pain and agony in the next life. I hate him.